Welcome back, Defenders. Today I have to make the video I was hoping I didn't have to make, but it happened. Donald J. Trump will be the 47th President of the United States. Let's quick talk about how did this happen, and then I'll explain what does this mean for Ukraine. And as far as what happened, it's obvious, just from the popular votes. At the moment, Donald Trump has about 73 million votes. There's still mail-in ballots coming in. Donald Trump will go over 73 million. But when you look at his voter turnout from 4 years ago, how many people voted for Donald Trump? And it was 74 million. Donald Trump basically got the exact same number of votes as he did 4 years ago. Meanwhile, the Democrats with Kamala Harris, at the moment they're at 68 million votes, but 4 years ago Joe Biden got 81 million votes, meaning about 13 million Democrats who voted for Joe Biden 4 years ago just stayed home this year. Yes, there's some people who switched their votes, just assume they cancel each other out. And voter turnout was not good. And what confused me was seeing all of the early voting and mail-in voting. In the 2020 and the 2016 election, this favored Democrats. But it's obvious that the Republicans have caught up. The Republicans for this election cycle were also telling their people, vote early, do your mail-in ballot. So early voting is no longer an indication of a Democratic advantage. That's the honest truth that I'm taking away from this election. On top of that, I just think corporate media is dead. Legacy media, MSNBC, CNN, The Washington Post, The New York Times, for-profit corporate media is useless. A majority of Americans today get their news and information from social media, from podcasts. And apparently Republicans figured this out over 4 years ago, and they've been building their presence on social media to influence the opinions of people who are on social media all day, every day. Nobody is paying attention to the mainstream news. Social media now is the mainstream news, and social media is dominated by conservative and right-wing commentators, personalities. The number one podcast in the world is The Joe Rogan Show. And Donald Trump, Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, RFK Jr. were on Joe Rogan anytime they would let Joe Rogan would let them come on. The number two podcast in the world is The Tucker Carlson Show. Tucker Carlson was fired from Fox News, and he's more powerful and influential today, I think, because of it. Get off cable news. Cable news doesn't matter. Other right-wing shows, The Charlie Kirk Show, we've got Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly. If Democrats ever want to win the presidency ever again, they need to give up on corporate media, mainstream news. They have to take the fight to social media. They have to promote and appear on and bolster people that share their ideology on social media platforms. So Kamala Harris and Tim Walz declining to go on Joe Rogan's show, this was a huge mistake. I'm going to admit it now. And I know why they don't do it. When you sit down for a 3-hour podcast, what goes viral is a 60-second clip of you saying something stupid. It's really hard to sit down and casually talk for someone for 3 hours without saying something stupid. So that's why they didn't want to do it. But I think the American people are okay with this. They're okay with flawed individuals, individuals making mistakes, individuals even saying stupid things sometimes. As long as you're authentic, as long as you look like you're being honest and trying. That's the perception. That's my takeaway. And there are Democrats who go on these right-wing podcasts. Bernie Sanders is a frequent guest. Bernie Sanders and Joe Rogan are friends. People who voted for Donald Trump have a favorable opinion of Bernie Sanders because he's not afraid. He's willing to go on these 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour podcasts and fight for what he believes. I think there's a lot of Americans who voted for Trump that would have liked to see this from the Democrats. And the Democrats instead, every opportunity, they give that soundbite on CNN, they go on Fox News, they go on MSNBC, they write an editorial for the Washington Post or the New York Times. And it was useless. It was all useless. It was never going to defeat Donald Trump. So what's the agenda? And I don't understand it. But I'm a proud American, and Donald Trump did win. A majority of Americans in a free and fair election voted for this vision of America. And I want to understand it. I don't understand Elon Musk's crypto bro plans, but I hope it's good. Something like 70% of white guys in America voted for Trump, and I'm a white guy. And I'm being promised that this new crypto bro future is coming, and it's going to be amazing for everyone. I hope it is. If Donald Trump succeeds, America succeeds, and I'm always going to root for my country to succeed. Just because the person I voted for did not win doesn't mean I'm going to try and sabotage America or make America worse, because I think that'll help me in the next election. That's not who I am. I would never do that. So with Donald Trump taking the presidency on January 20th, I'm going to be critical of him for his actions if I oppose them. But if he does something I want, something I like, I am actually going to praise him, because that's what you should do as an independent free thinker, which I do consider myself to be. So let's start with the first thing. Donald Trump has already broken one of his campaign promises. He repeatedly said that as soon as he was president-elect, he would solve the war in Ukraine within 24 hours. So I'm going to play the clip.
I would fix that within 24 hours. And if I win, before I get into the office, I will have that war settled. 100% sure. As president-elect, if I win this election, the first thing I'm going to do is call up Zelensky and call up President Putin, and I'm going to say, you got to make a deal. This is crazy.
So I never believed Trump, and I don't even think Trump's supporters actually believed he could solve the entire war within 24 hours. That's insane. But he is going to come up with a plan over the next 2.5 months. And nobody knows what that plan is. Nobody knows. So let's first start with Ukraine's reaction, and I'll talk about my ideas and theories of what could happen for Ukraine, both negative and positive. Something beyond our control. Ukrainian servicemen react to Trump's victory. This is the general reaction, and I'll be honest, the first 12 hours, this is what I thought, this is how I felt. But I have to live in reality. These are the facts. I'm only going to deal with the facts. As a candidate for president, you have to speculate. You have to make assumptions. But that time is over. We have to live in reality now. These are the facts. So President Zelensky has congratulated Trump on his election victory. This is the correct thing to do for President Zelensky. Here's what he says. I had an excellent call with President Trump and congratulated him on his historic landslide victory. His tremendous campaign made this result possible. I praised his family and team for their great work. We agreed to maintain close dialogue and advance our cooperation. Strong and unwavering U.S. leadership is vital for the world and for a just peace. So anytime Donald Trump does something I like and I think is beneficial, I'm going to praise him. Give him positive expectations to live up to. Praise the guy. Flatter the guy. Give him what he wants so he does the right thing and continues to militarily support Ukraine. And we now have to ask the question, when Trump assumes the presidency on January 20th, who is the leader of the Western Alliance? Who is the leader of the free world? And I don't think it's Trump. Trump will be the US president, but depending on his actions, he's not leading the Western coalition. The leader is President Zelensky, and I'm going to be following him closely on social media to understand what's the plan. What do you want people to do? People who are dedicating their lives right now to supporting and defending Ukraine. The world is looking to President Zelensky for his leadership, which might not last much longer. Because of Zelensky and Trump's complicated past relations, Zelensky declined to investigate Hunter Biden prior to the 2020 election. Trump doesn't favor Zelensky, and if Zelensky stepping down, or Zelensky calling for snap elections in which someone else takes over, if this benefits the people of Ukraine, Zelensky should do it, but I think he would willingly do it. If Zelensky and Trump, for whatever reason, can't establish a positive relationship, then let somebody else step into that role. Here is the former Ukrainian president, Petro Poroshenko, once again congratulating Donald Trump. He's already expressed interest in coming back as president, and if he can work with Trump, do it. I'm not Ukrainian. I don't have a vote. I don't have a say. But I have a speculation over the next year. This is the direction where Ukrainian politics might go. And as for the Russians, Kremlin officials hope Trump will hand Putin an advantage in Ukraine. So some Russians are celebrating. Here is Alexander Dugin, Putin's brain. This is what he says after this election. So we have won. That is decisive. The world will never, ever be like before. Globalists have lost their final combat. The future is finally open. I am really happy. I don't think it's this clear-cut. Yes, during the campaign, I drew everything in black and white. But it's actually more gray than what Alexander Dugin is making it out to be. Putin won't congratulate Trump just yet, according to Dmitry Peskov. Here is what the Kremlin spokesperson says. The United States is an unfriendly country, involved in a war against Russia. Putin has no plans to welcome Trump. Of course, for the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years, American weapons have killed hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers. How do you think the families of those Russian soldiers feel about Americans, given that it's Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, F-16s, Patriot air defense systems, Javelins, HIMARS, Gimlers, that have been killing all these Russian soldiers the last 3 years? So any fantasy talk that Trump and Putin are going to get in the same room and shake hands and hug and laugh it all out, I don't think the Russian people would approve of that, even if they think Trump is better for Russia, because he would cut off military aid. The Russians still hate the United States. We're still their geopolitical nemesis and rival, and because we have free and fair elections, in 4 years everything can change. The Democrats could win, or a anti-Russian Republican could be nominated. We just proved American elections are chaos, and you can't predict or rely on anything from the United States. Just being honest. So here's the good news, bad news, and I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. The bad news list is very large, which is why there's so much fear and uncertainty. Trump could end all military cooperation between the United States military and Ukraine. Trump could lift all sanctions on Russia. Trump could unfreeze and return all Russian assets. There's some other bad news scenarios, such as returning Russian dissidents or going after people like Bill Browder, who have been Russia's worst nemesis. There's a lot of people who have come to the United States for protection against the FSB, and Trump might choose not to protect those people. So that's the bad news, but it's all hypotheticals at the moment. We don't know for sure what Trump will do. So let's talk about potential positives. And Trump frames himself as a deal maker and a businessman. But his primary motivation is not the best interests of America. It's the best interests of himself. And he only does something if he thinks it benefits himself. So it doesn't matter if Russia has been helping Trump in the past. DNC emails hacked, the Tenet media scandal. It doesn't matter if Russia has been helping Trump. If Trump makes a deal in the moment you have to give him something. Russia's going to make their demands. And Trump is going to say, okay, I'll do that, but you have to do something for me. And Vladimir Putin and the Russian people might not be in a mood to give him anything, or to negotiate, or to cooperate with whatever Trump wants. Trump is a hothead, and he could easily overreact to the Russians denying or negotiating or being stubborn, and he could actually make the situation worse for Russia. Is this a likely possibility? No, but it's still a possibility. Both of these people are unpredictable. Both of these people can be irrational, I argue. And let's pretend Trump and the Russians create this capitulation deal, and then they just hand it to the Ukrainians saying, you have to accept it. Ukraine and the Europeans can just say no, and the war will continue. And if the Ukrainians don't accept whatever deal Trump negotiates, the war goes on. And if the war starts going badly for Ukraine, these are going to be top news stories, top headlines for the entire world day after day. Potentially the fall of Zaporizhia, the fall of Kharkiv, the fall of Odessa, the fall of Kyiv. The world's not going to stop ignoring Ukraine just because the United States ends military aid. I will still be here talking about it. I will still be here making these videos. And this will make Trump look bad because his campaign promise was he was going to solve everything. So Trump, even though he's never running for re-election, he's never running for office again, he can't. He still cares what his followers think of him. He genuinely loves to be loved by the people who love him. And he doesn't want to lose that. And if things in Ukraine go badly or spiral out of control, this will look worse for the United States than our withdrawal from Afghanistan. That is the legacy, that is the headline, that is what people are going to be saying every day, and I don't think Trump wants this scenario. The other good news, this is actually good news to Trump winning, the Biden administration now must rush deliver about $6 billion in remaining aid to Ukraine before Trump takes office on January 20th. So all the money that was allocated by Congress last May, Biden was stretching this out. Let's pretend Harris had won, but MAGA took Congress. MAGA could have blocked all future military aid anyways, and Biden would have stretched this money out as long as possible, stretched it out until next summer even. The Democrats can't do this now. They have to rush deliver as much as they can prior to January 20th, meaning Ukraine in the short term is actually going to receive more military aid than they would otherwise if Harris had won. On top of that, we don't have to worry about escalation management anymore. The fear the last 3 years is that if we do this, Russia might nuke Washington, D.C., Russia might nuke Chicago, Russia might nuke Alaska. And they're not going to do that if they believe they'll have favorable negotiating terms on January 20th. So Biden can lift all restrictions, rush deliver as much as you can, and give Ukraine permission to use JASSMs and ATACMS anywhere they want on the territory of Russia. Russia is not going to respond with a nuclear weapon. We know this for a fact the next 2.5 months. There's other things Biden can do now that the election is over and the gloves can come off. This will be a short-term net positive for Ukraine. I'm now going to get into some of the lesser aspects of a Trump victory, one of them being Trump hates Iran. Iran hates Trump. Iran is Russia's military ally. So it's possible in the next year or two that the United States could take military action against Iran to cripple them. Or they could just look the other way and Israel could do the job. Trump is fiercely pro-Israel, and if I'm being honest, for the people of Gaza and Palestine, this is a worst-case scenario. But a positive for Ukraine is Iran is a big loser, and Iran is a military ally of Russia. This is one aspect that benefits Ukraine. Europe must take greater responsibility for its own security. This is the Polish foreign minister calling for immediate European action on defense spending and migration policy. Here's thoughts from Jessica Berlin. Europe had over 2 years to defend Ukraine with Biden behind us. We wasted them, and now may have to defend Ukraine with Trump behind Russia. That's not American voters' fault. It's European leaders' fault. I've made this argument, but there's no more excuses. The economies of Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Canada are all larger than Russia. Nobody is giving help to the Russians for free. Russia is being forced to pay for all of it. So even without the help of the United States, Europe has the population and they have the economic capacity to outproduce and defeat the Russians without the help of America. This has been possible the entire time. But because Biden was in charge of the NATO alliance, everyone just kind of dithered and was waiting for the United States to take action, to take lead. And I apologize, it just didn't happen. So the Europeans have to cooperate, they have to get creative. I argue European militaries should be deployed to Ukraine. Maybe not in combat positions on the front lines, but it's been almost 3 years. The excuses have to end. Send your trainers, send your technicians, send your maintainers, send your logisticians. If the Europeans actually want to win this war, send your support staff, anybody you can, to Ukraine to free up soldiers that can then deploy to the front lines. This solution has always been there, but the Europeans have been waiting for America to magically do something so they don't have to take action themselves. This day ends on January 20th. The next interesting aspect is if Donald Trump actually tries to cut off all military support to Ukraine, he's going to start receiving phone calls from defense executives and senators and congressmen in districts with defense production. I argue the military-industrial complex is not as powerful as it was 30 or 40 years ago. But these are still people that provide jobs, high-paying jobs in mostly red states. So if Donald Trump starts blocking military aid from other countries, well, now you can no longer buy American weapons. If people in the UK or people in Denmark or Spain or whatever are going to be blocked from transferring weapons they bought to help Ukraine, then this means they can no longer buy American weapons ever again. They'll start buying German weapons, French weapons, Polish weapons, South Korean weapons. Because if the United States is actually going to start blocking military aid from a European country to a European ally, then kiss the American defense production industry goodbye. Nobody will ever buy American again if America won't even allow a continent, the European continent, to defend itself. I'm skeptical that Trump would actually go down that road. The next funny thing is oil production. Trump mentioned this in his acceptance speech. He loves producing oil. He's obsessed with cheap gas here in the United States for people to drive around in their cars, which is funny because Elon Musk, promotes electric vehicles that don't run on gas. But you can look at U.S. oil production the last time Trump was president. He took office in 2017, and like a rocket ship, oil production in the United States went up. This is possible through deregulation, building more pipelines, granting more access to federal lands, or whatever. I don't know how he would do it. I don't care. But if Trump is actually capable of increasing production of US oil, somehow, well, this is very bad for the Russians, because the Russians are dependent on the price of oil. If the United States can produce more, Russia makes less on every barrel they export. Trump could inadvertently, without even intending to, hasten the economic collapse of Russia. It's such a crazy scenario, it might actually happen. And the Russians are hurting. Russia has been hiding oil sales from OPEC to fund their war in Ukraine. Of course they were. Vladimir Putin, a year and a half ago, went to Saudi Arabia to convince the Saudis to pump less. The plan was this was going to raise the global price of oil and everyone would make more money for pumping less. And that didn't happen. And the Saudis the last year lost a lot of money. And the Saudis just found out the Russians were cheating on them. And they were producing more and exporting more with ghost tanker fleets. So the Saudis are upset and they already announced they're going to start producing more. They're going to drive the price of oil down, $50 a barrel, whatever. This is bad news for the Russians. The next one is very bizarre, but Trump's economic plan is insane, and it's not going to work. Trump says a lot of things that he never ends up doing, but if he actually ends up doing this, this could hasten an economic collapse of Russia. Why Trump's plans for tariffs could be bad for Europe's economy. Trump has said he wants to put 100, 200% tariffs on everything. This would trigger a trade war in which other countries would retaliate against the United States. This could trigger a massive recession here in the United States. And when the United States goes into recession, it often triggers a global recession. This is kind of what they ran on. Elon Musk assures voters that Trump's victory would deliver temporary hardship. So they want to change and do so many things rapidly. Elon Musk has admitted the US economy might go down. Things might actually look bad before they eventually get better. That was apparently a winning campaign promise that voters voted for. But in the short term, if Elon Musk and Donald Trump crash the US economy and trigger a global recession, Russia is the least capable country in the world right now to survive any kind of economic slowdown or recession. Things in Russia would get worse than in Europe or in North America or East Asia if the world goes into a global recession. It's crazy, but it's still a possibility. Case in point, Russia's central bank signals very likely December rate hike. So the interest rates are already at 21%, and they're going to go higher in Russia. What does this mean? The maximum level of mortgage rates in major Russian banks has reached 43%. If you want to buy a home or an apartment, can you afford a 43% interest rate? I'm currently paying 7%. That feels like a lot to me. So the Russian economy is in a downward spiral. It just gets worse every single day. And if the US economy gets bad, it'll just compound everything for the rest of the world, but especially the Russians. So this is what we're going to do. If you need to take a mental break or a mental holiday, do it. Trump doesn't take office for 2.5 months. And I am no longer going to talk about what Donald Trump might do. I'm only going to talk about what he's done once he's taken action. Because there's uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what he's going to do. I preferred the certainty of Kamala Harris, but perhaps something crazy could happen. And I'm going to be here. I'm going to be making these videos still, supporting and defending Ukraine. Things are going to get wild as we head into the wintertime, as the Russian forces are already struggling. Here's another video. These are coming out every day. Russian soldiers on the front lines begging for help. And here's a Russian soldier saying that they need warm clothing as the Russian ground forces are heading into another brutal winter. I'm the deputy at Bars 20. My call sign is Cherry. Now, we urgently need winter clothes like coats and pants. So far, the Army hasn't given us anything. I have 170 people on the front. We're receiving no support from the Army. They keep telling us that the supply situation is bad. So please, help us with warm clothing if you can. I found out that a set costs 6,000 rubles in Rostov or Voronezh. Yesterday I had to get clothing for 50 people. 120 out of 170 people on the front line don't have clothing. We'd be grateful for help because the guys are freezing in the trenches. Thank you. So that's a report from a Russian soldier on the front lines. It's November, and they're already freezing because they don't have cold weather gear. What about those North Koreans in Kursk? What are they up to? North Korean soldiers turned to pornography after gaining internet access in Russia. A usually reliable source tells me that North Korean soldiers who have deployed to Russia have never had unfettered access to the internet before. As a result, they are gorging pornography. I mean, we could talk about this. We could talk about this, but I'm going to move on. I wanted to mention it, but we're going to move on, guys. Drones strike Russian Caspian fleet base in Dagestan for the first time. This is something I've always wondered, why Ukraine wasn't targeting ships in the Caspian Sea. Dagestan is right here on the coast. This is the Caspian Sea, and Russia retreated a lot of their ships to the Caspian. They launch caliber cruise missiles, I think, from the Caspian. There is a video of a Ukrainian drone slamming into one of their flotillas. If you want to see it, I'll link it down below. Real quick, I want to mention this story. Google responds to claims map images reveal the locations of Ukrainian weapons. So I know friends of the channel, Dennis Davidoff, mentioned this in his video 2 days ago. When you go on Google Images, you can find Patriot launchers visible. And Google did respond saying that these satellite images were taken more than a year ago and come from publicly available sources. We deliberately do not publish the latest images of war zones. So because Ukraine is in a war zone, Google is saying that any images for satellite images that are published are greater than a year old. That's good news. And sure enough, this airport in Kyiv, just because people were talking about it, Google scrubbed the images anyways, so it's not a big deal. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. Australia pledges additional patrol boats to strengthen Ukraine's coastal defenses. Thank you so much to the people of Australia. Sweden unveils new aid package for Ukraine worth $9 million. Thank you so much to Sweden. Final video. There was a lot of sadness the last 2 days. Just going through social media, I didn't see or find any feel-good clips, guys. So I'm gonna pull up a classic. This is one of my favorites from the liberation of Kherson. This was, I think officially 2 years ago that the city of Kherson was liberated. And this Ukrainian woman, while living under occupation, had to hide her Ukrainian flag in her garden.
Через одну где-то могу не совсем вот.
It is amazing.
Мокренький, мокренький, мокрый, мокрый,
Ну, живой.
ну живой, мокрый, но живой. Не плохой только.
There are Ukrainians who, for almost 3 years now, have probably had their Ukrainian flags buried in their gardens, and they're still waiting. But the Ukrainian people, for over 300 years now, have been fighting for and waiting for their true final independence from the Russians. This isn't the end. Russia is not going to win this war. Russia will be defeated. I don't know how yet, but it's going to happen. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.